So, Thomas, when we first met, you were very adamant in telling me that where the focus is currently in our marketing discussion may not be the right place because you were trying to explain to me a very, I would say, profound shift that is occurring in human behavior in terms of technology. And that is kind of where I'd like to start to set, let's say, the foundation for the rest of our discussion. Can you briefly explain to everyone that's listening what that shift looks like for you? Or how you see things?
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for the question. It's indeed one thing that I observed over the last couple of months is that the majority of conversation when we speak about AI and specifically generative AI is the optimization side of the conversation. So where can Gen AI optimize our processes? How can it make content creation better? How can it improve the operations within a marketing department? How can an agentic workforce, how can that operate? How can that augment and facilitate, let's say, the work product that we need to be doing? And online, we see a lot of these cheat codes and cheats to sheets and applications and softwares popping up that are promising, hey, give us your idea of your campaign and we'll create all the assets automatically and all of this kind of stuff. And I felt like there is something really missing here. And that I think it comes back to the fact that I've lived, on this intersection of technology and people for the majority of my professional life. And what I'm seeing but why are we not talking about the fundamental shift in how people are going to be living with technology? Because AI is so ubiquitous and it's going to fundamentally change how people discover and have agency within the digital space. Not just marketing, not just buying something, no, but like all technology. And that is something that I believe as marketers and as brand people, but especially even also as designers, we've always been about the behavioral sciences, right? About the humanities, about understanding people and understanding and designing product experiences, interactions, brand experiences, brand propositions, fundamentally around really understanding people. And so, why is that conversation not happening enough? I'm not saying it's not happening, but it wasn't happening enough in at least not in the brand and marketing space, I believe. And that's where I wanted to begin with the manifesto.
Nice. I think this is one of the things that really attracted me to the conversation in the first place was that you could clearly see that you were looking at it from a human experience perspective. And I think for our platform, it's key, that we need to kind of maintain clarity and vision upon where the human plays the role, how that's changing, and to very, very clearly, communicate that it's not just about replacing things, it's about actually transforming them. Things are simply transforming. And I know that there are a lot of people listening that will probably sit there and say, yes, okay, we talk about human experience, we talk about where the technology is going, but what makes you so sure that this will happen? Is this what people really want? Is this what people are really doing? Can you see signals or signs or happening in the world, let's say, in our industry, outside of our industry, that is further contributing to the fact that yes, this is like a true fact that we must all kind of contend with at this point?
Yeah, so I mean, some of it is measured fact, and some of it is reading between the tea leaves and reading the signals in many ways. But coming from at least me, who has been looking at technology and how people behave with technology for the last 30 years. So it's, let's say, a solid hypothesis that I make. So let's start with the hard data, and that is that the adoption of AI since the launch of ChatGPT 3 in 2023, the adoption, we've never seen such a fast adoption of any technology ever. So that by itself, and I don't know what the current numbers are of billions and trillions of users, but just the speed of proliferation of the technology and adoption of the technology is humongous. A specific data point that I found very interesting was from OpenAI, where they looked at, well, what are the types of queries and prompts that people are actually inputting into ChatGPT? And 70% of the queries are not work-related. They are, how do I make a sandwich like this? Or help me do a recipe? Or I have this issue and can you help me with that? In other words, very kind of everyday life, sort of utilitarian questions. Then there is a lot of people that are using AI as a way to reflect on things. It's like, like almost like a buddy or a psychologist or, somebody that can help you out in a moment of reflection or need. And so this made me understand, and this made me also reflect on the fact, well, but if the majority of prompts and interactions are everyday life type of interactions, it means that the way that people are assimilating the technology and are using the technology is not just for work. It is for just everyday life. And this is where I start to see, okay, but this is really becoming a thing when it comes to our relationship with information and our relationship with technology. The latest data that I've seen by McKinsey is how AI is being used to support all of the phases of the customer journey, right? From discovery down to conversion. And that is just completely increasing. And in some categories, consumer electronics, it's the number one category that is being impacted at the moment by Gen AI and conversational AI interaction, but also financial services and B2B. So we are seeing it happen across industries. And so also that is when we're talking about 20, 30% use of AI in these contexts, in the space of not even 2 years, we can talk about a technology that is very, very quickly becoming part of everyday life. And yeah, I think it's here to stay. And again, I keep emphasizing the fact that the technology just arrived. I mean, if you think about the mid-90s when the internet arrived, for the first couple of years, the people that were using the internet was not the everyday folks, right? I mean, it was not the everyday person. It was really the early adopters for the first couple of years that were using and making websites. And it really took quite a while for the technology to mature. We didn't see e-commerce, for years. Social media came way later. It really took a lot of time. And AI is at a speed of proliferation that is unheard of. And it's still at its infancy when it comes to the maturity of the technology itself. And let me make an example of this is right now I'm going to try to frame this in the most simple way that I can. Right now, AI is embedded in the deeper surface layers of the digital experience. In other words, ChatGPT is an app on your phone. So you need to open the app, and then in the app, you have your conversation. OpenAI did launch a browser, right? The Atlas browser. And so all of a sudden you have, on a different surface level, you have a companion that is able to navigate the internet with you. But what happens when that level of companionship and intelligence is going to be at operating system level? So your entire computer is operated with a conversation, and you tell it to, hey, can you write me an email? And it just does that, and it kind of understands all the files. And we see that, the Geminis are going there, and we see Copilot from Microsoft also obviously going there in that direction. But this is the direction of travel, right? Is a technology that is able to become your number one interface between your intent. Do I want to work? Do I want to converse? Do I want to entertain myself? Do I want to, whatever it is, it will be your number one gateway to actually get that done and to actually do it in many ways. And then if we look at the emerging AI technologies that are there that are not yet, let's say, very widely spread, that are still very much emergent. And I think vibe coding is one of these examples. I wouldn't say nobody's using it, because I know a lot of people who are, but it's not yet, at the same level of proliferation as just ChatGPT. But with vibe coding, literally with a prompt of 140 characters, you can create an application that actually works. You can say, hey, create me a recipe maker that only makes healthy food. And I love Indian food, but I don't like Italian food. And so, this is what this recipe maker needs to be. And it will just make the application. Now that is something that is, first of all, so empowering, but also so disruptive, because between my prompt and the actual application running, today, there is a 2-minute lag, which already is pretty incredible. But it takes about 2 minutes for the application to render and to work. And still, it makes some mistakes here and there. But just the fact that I can do that without any coding knowledge and just expressing my intent, what it is that I want and need in that moment of time, and within 2 minutes, this interface is rendered in front of your eyes and you can use it. In a very short space of time, this will be instant. This will not be a 2-minute wait. This will just happen. And, you say, this is what I want to do, and boom, the interface renders in front of you. And so this is this idea of a technology that is going to be able to, in real time, manifest in front of you what you need in terms of functionality, in terms of utility, in terms of entertainment, in terms of productivity. Anything will be able to be rendered in real time in front of you. And so if that is the direction of travel, and we see the early signs of these technologies sort of popping up, then I don't think it's a wild thought to imagine a future, not too distant future, where all of the current man-made prefabricated surfaces, the applications, the websites, the, whatever it is that's out there today on the internet for us to waste our time on, what's their utility anymore? If there is a real-time rendered interface that I can interact with, get a task done, and then the interface gets out of the way again. And this is what I think is on the horizon. And I don't think, when we take it in the context of brands, I don't think anyone is ready for this, right? And we're not thinking about this. And this is where I really started to go with the vision on, I think this is where we will be in about 3 to 5 years' time. And then, how fast this will go, it will depend, and it's very hard to pinpoint. And some people will say it's happen in 5 years. Other people will say it's going to happen much faster. It's a little bit of a moving target, but this is the direction of travel. And it's interesting because most recently, a few of the, let's say, tech bros that are really in the front seat of developing this stuff, right? They've been making similar projections of the future, right? Where, and Elon Musk recently on a podcast with Joe Rogan started to talk about, look, I don't believe the future of AI is going to be more apps and more interfaces and more devices and more things. He said, look, there's going to be screens and some device that can do the inference between you and the AI. And then you will have your AI that is serving you, and that AI will be interacting with the cloud AIs of brands and companies and things. And then the AI will render the experiences for you, and you will do everything. You will write an email through your AI, you will discover your vacation on an AI, and it's all going to be intermediated like that. And he also projected that to be, well, this is maybe 5 years ahead. Very similarly, the AI lead CEO at Microsoft kind of depicted a very, very similar future. And even recently, where Sam Altman of OpenAI and Jony Ive, ex-Apple designer, have joined forces to come up with an AI native product. And I believe if anyone can do it, it's Jony Ive most probably. But they were also depicting a very similar sort of reality, where Sam Altman made a very nice analogy, which I find very inspirational. He said, look, your current devices, your laptops, your phones, etc., they kind of feel Times Square, right? I mean, you open up your laptop, you've got a gazillion of apps and flashing notifications, and everything is grabbing your attention everywhere. And every app is a little brand screaming for an open me, I'm Instagram, and open me, I'm your email with 500 unread messages. And, everything is flashing on Times Square. And he says, I believe the future of an interface will be more, sitting by a lake and having a lot of calm and peacefulness, because you know that, your AI is actually taking care of a lot of stuff that for you is only but noise. And so, they're all in their own language, sort of expressing a similar view. Now, they are the tech bros. So, we need to frame that also with that perspective. For them, every problem is a technological solution, in their world. But I think this is directionally where the technology is going. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that there are a lot of people that will, let's say, sit there and kind of listen to that lake story and be tempted to kind of immediately have some kind of visceral reaction against it, let's say, claiming that, there will be other issues, and we're all well aware of that. I think the point here is just that this concept of, a digital twin, a butler, somebody that really understands me, it's difficult to counter this argument of whether people will enjoy that or not, in my opinion, because there is immense friction online. And you always say that, we as designers, as brand professionals, as marketers, we are as much behavioral scientists as we are whatever our professions are. And if you look at it, the friction there is immense. People don't enjoy that. So it's not like it's a pleasant process. And if you pair that with the fact of a digital twin that ultimately knows who you are and delivers, let's say, exactly what you need at the time that you need, in a way that, I'm sorry, but brands have ultimately failed endlessly for years to deliver that kind of personalization, then it's difficult to, let's say, I would hope that we can all just get on the same page that this is going to happen one way or another. The timing might differ. It might look a little bit this way or that way. But at the end of the day, we need to figure out what the heck this means for how we build our brands, because otherwise we're just going to spend endless time in argument and miss the boat. So like I did, because I'm known for being avidly for, like I said, humans and the human experience and human generation and things like this. So I think I'm a good case in point, and I present myself as such, for somebody that remained open-minded to understand that, there is no time to sit there and really overdo it. We need to take steps. We need to do our best to figure out what the next step is and take small steps in the right direction and work kind of collaboratively to figure out what this means, rather than trying to stop a tidal wave from because it's not going to work.
Maybe to quickly build on what you just said is when we talk about friction, I think, and this topic has come up ever since, publishing the manifesto, and it's good to maybe clarify, is that, friction isn't a bad thing in itself. So it's good to maybe qualify it. There is meaningless friction,
Mm-hmm.
right? The friction that really is only but noise in the way that we, interact with digital media and technology. A lot of the friction that is there is, if you really ask yourself the question, is this absolutely necessary? And is this friction adding any value to my life? We can probably agree that 80 to 90% of it is, the answer is no. As well, if you can take this away from me tomorrow, I will only but applaud it. Right. And I made this analogy, I think, with you before as well, which is, if I'm currently looking for, buying a sweater, you end up, going to Google, ending up on various retailer stores, comparing sizes, only but to find that the one that you really want is out of stock, and you can leave your email, and so they can notify you by email. Oh my God, to take this out of my life. You waste a lot of time. And sure, there is something which I would then say, what is then the meaningful friction? Because I believe that when
Mm-hmm.
you remove the meaningless, you can put back the meaningful. So maybe there is a very meaningful way to do discovery. So, for example, in an agent-mediated reality, there might be a new way of discovering new products and new services and new things, which is not I type in something in Google and now I need to go and find things, et cetera, or I need to infinitely scroll my TikTok or whatever it is. There might be new ways of discovery that at the moment we're not even able to conceptualize just yet what they are. But this is where I think we are uncovering something very nice, which is the technology will be able to allow us to remove meaningless friction that was imposed on us just because of how the technology works, really, the limitations of the tech. And now all of a sudden that friction is removed. And so what do we put back in place, right? What meaning do we now put back? And this is what I would then call and frame as meaningful friction, something that we don't mind spending our time on because it's very pleasurable and it's fun and it's something really valuable.
Yeah, I think in a let's say very experienced focus narrative and approach, that would be obviously the right way to do it. I guess what I was trying to say is that, right now we are brands in a state of reaction. We're not the ones building the AIs. So at the end of the day, we can have an opinion. We can sit there and talk about, how are people being educated? What are some of the, you said, even meaningful friction in the sense of how are the interactions being built in order to empower the human rather than kind of degrade certain aspects and things like this? That for sure is a topic of conversation. But I think for us, it's just a matter of, like you always say, designers have always said that the best UI is no UI. So it's not we didn't see this coming. And I think that and I will just mention this very lightly, but from also a philosophical point of view, we have spent years discussing how layers and layers and layers have been added in terms of development and technology to systems that are fundamentally no longer the right ones. And we keep trying to kind of patch the work. And at one point, it wasn't unlikely that something would come and kind of say, listen, here's a need, but also a chance, an opportunity to rethink how this might work for people, for businesses, and for brands. I think what we're about to discuss now for brands actually proves that, because what you end up seeing is that it really goes back to the stuff that we all loved, the reasons why we joined this profession, why we joined this industry. And I really want to kind of uncover that so that, like I said, so that people can have a little bit of a similar experience to me that is more of a rejuvenation than a fear of any kind. So in the context of brands, though, you mention a very specific law. You mentioned that in this technological shift, in this, desire and adaptation to more personalization, the AI butler, specifically that companionship, also the ubiquity of the technology that is being helped by edge computing and things like this, where really you will be able to have kind of, let's say, the same, I almost imagine it as like the same voice kind of following you, not only in your house, but in the car, but in this world. In order for brands to survive when many of the things that they're used to communicating through are kind of no longer their own channels or their own spaces, you mentioned a law called the Legible-Lovable Law, which kind of poses these two sides and encapsulates how brands should kind of see this. I said, not from is the technology right or ethical or whatever it might be, but from this is what's going to happen. And as a brand, what does this mean for me? Can you explain the Legible-Lovable Law for a moment so that we can just get on the same page?
Yeah, so the Legible-Lovable Law really is something that emerged when I was observing and trying to understand the dynamics at play with AI, and especially AI in relation to brands. And it emerged because I wasn't per se looking for it. So that was interesting because it just emerged as a little bit of as an aha moment for me, saying, well, if AI is going to mediate the way that I interact with the digital space, then the AI's job will be to be my trusted companion who knows me and is able to pre-select and make sense out of everything that's out there in the world and come back to me with ideas, solutions, products, services, decisions to be made in a way that gives me still choice, but that I can trust and that give me still the space to have my own agency to make the decision. And in that reflection, I then started to think, okay, well, then what does this mean? Because my AI agent, if I cannot trust it, I'm not going to use it. It's going to fail. So the prerequisite for this butler to work and for me to really trust it with my data, with my decisions, with my agency in the digital space, I will need to be able to trust it. That means that the level of scrutiny and diligence that the AI agent will need to do in the digital space for me is second to none. And in order for the AI agent to be able to do that in relation to brands, but, to be honest, with every online institution, this will hold for governments and it will hold for everything else, is that it will need to be able to, first of all, it needs to be able to parse the information. So if it is convoluted, inconsistent, if we take a company website, if you say this on page X, but you say something in a different way on page Y, then you're making it very hard for the AI to sort of figure it out, and it will make something of it, right? It will just interpret it in its best way possible, and we'll see what happens. So one is the readability itself, right? So really be able to parse the information with clarity. The second piece, it needs to verify the provenance. In this digital Gen AI world, I mean, we're going to be able to generate every piece of fake content, fake visual assets, fake everything. So this provenance verification is going to be very important, right? So, an AI agent will need to have to be able to confidently say, I am showing you something from brand X, and by the way, what I'm showing you is verified. This is coming from the brand. It is ethical. It is yada, 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 everything that needs to be proven. And then thirdly is the AI will need to triangulate for me, and it will do that if it wants to be trusted. It will need to triangulate between what the brand says about itself, its product, its price, features and functions. And it needs to be able to verify that with third parties. Is what the brand is saying indeed what the perceptions and the opinions are of others on this product and service? And the gap between these two, what others say and what you say, is a gap which can only be closed by a brand through integrity. Right? The only way that you can close a perception gap, and arguably you can never fully close it, right? Because, stuff happens, but this is your antidote, let's say, to closing that gap as much as possible. And making sure that when you get verified in the knowledge graph out there, that the agent is indeed able to say, yep, it's clear to me what this brand has to offer. It fits with your prompt. I've verified the provenance of this, what the brand is saying and the content, and I've checked it with third parties. They confirm the validity of this proposition. Hence, it appears in my recommendations for you because it makes sense.
Which is already immense, right? That is a huge step already in the right direction. If you also pair it with the concept of you can no longer, let's say, fiddle with feature names or when your product is very similar to another's, or a lot of this, let's say, less kind behaviors that we've seen from brands and from marketing and things this over the years, over forever, really. A lot of that becomes less possible. So we're already talking about a huge benefit, maybe a little bit, a little bit shocking at first, for sure. But at the end of the day, when it comes to what we were saying about human experience, we're already benefiting that. It's already improving just from this first, let's say, first component of what we're discussing in the law, which is simply the legibility of it. Simply because you make it readable to AI, by definition, that means that you as a brand are signaling to the world, I'm taking responsibility for what I say and what I do, and that I don't believe, let's say, I have anything to worry about or to hide or to this is going to become a stake in the ground in and of itself. No, for brands that are really that take, let's say, some of the first steps, they will be, I believe, applauded for taking this step because it's transparency at its core.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is transparency and living up to your promise, right? So living up to what it is that you're saying. So I think ultimately this will be good for people. And I also think just purely from the human experience, right? If you think about, maybe for, something that will cost you $1, it won't bother so much. But as soon as you start to pay, 50, 100, $150 for something, is oftentimes you get either FOMO, right? Is this the best choice? Or should I have gotten a different one? Am I getting the best deal? Did I not research this enough? All of these questions that you might be asking yourself, or even when the prices go even up, right? Think about purchasing a car, for example,
Yeah.
or the anxiety before you make such a purchase, right? Have I asked all the right questions? Have I checked everything? Am I really sure that this is the right thing for me? And so I think it will only but benefit humanity if done right. Also because the AI, if you think about a lot of the product information, content, campaigns, etc., they're all designed for human decision making and human, let's say, also irrational decision making, right? And I think with AI, we will be able to get to a place where the rational thinking is proposed to us, and then you can still override it. Look, if you really like the design of of an Audi versus another car brand, look, nothing's going to stop you to say, I'm just going to buy it anyway. But the rational decision making and the rational thinking behind it can be done by AI for you.
And this is what you were talking about with the shortlist effect, right? We're reaching also that discussion where it's about a little bit about, the AI will sit there and will present you with a rational set of options, but you as a person will still ultimately decide what it is you want to purchase, what it is you want to do for a certain category. Yes, there might be categories where if you want to buy batteries, you might let it kind of decide on its own and do that, the ultimate, let's say, no click shopping or whatever we want to call it, that is similar to, how big fans we were to the just repeat buying on Amazon. But I feel there we're starting to get into the lovability side of the equation, right? Compared to, let's say, just the legibility side, because that's another side that brands very much have to think about influencing, not just the being readable to machines, but we still very much need to be loved by humans.
Totally. And I think in the very short term, so we can even say in the now, a lot of what is happening is on the legibility side, right? So when we hear about generative engine optimization, or AEO, agentic engine optimization, it's very much all about the legibility part, right? It is about fixing consistency. It is about making sure that the LLMs can access you, that can read you, have access to the information, and optimizing basically your web presence for the parsing of the agents, right? I mean, that is what this new practice ultimately is all about, and what in many ways it starts when it comes to the legibility side of things. It doesn't yet cover provenance, it doesn't yet cover the other aspect, but it's the beginning of legibility. We also see the early signs of lovability. And lovability, let me first frame it, is in many ways where we as brand people, design people, campaign, right, agencies, we've been in this world for, in essence, our entire careers, right? Is how do we create a brand that people relate to, that really is meaningful in people's lives? How do we understand? How do we create a brand that attracts people in a way that is not just about features and prices, but is about something more profound, which is the role and the meaning that you have in someone's life. Now, in the B2B space, this meaning can be, of course, different, right? It is more about trust, and it's about a reputation that you need to have in order to have a trusted relationship in a B2B environment. But the essence of the craft in that sense is the same. It goes above and beyond the rational. It is something that needs to go into something visceral and something also irrational that we as people perceive and is necessary. And I would argue that the strong brands even go to a level of driving a sense of belonging. And in that sense of belonging, people, they kind of feel attracted and want to be part of it. I mean, if you think about, in the most obvious sense, the brands that achieve a status of fandom where people are prepared to, walk around with logos on their, shirts and whatever. That's where you go to the most extreme, let's say, manifestation of that, right? Of that sense of belonging, of expressing status, of expressing tribalism, or whatever it is. But it's something that has always been part of this lovability, right? As you can love and self-expression in many, many ways as well in the consumer space. So if we talk about lovability, this is not going away, but the complexity that is coming is that a brand will need to be able to codify that lovability for the intermediate agent to be able to find a match with what the human being cares for. And you see very early signs of this already today. Not many people do this, but in every AI, in every current LLM, you can go to the settings, and in the settings of, for example, ChatGPT, you can go in and program it to how you want it to behave, and you can tell it things about you that you find important and that you value. Now, I know a lot of people have programmed it to say, stop being so nice and, just applauding every single thing that I say. But one of the things that you can do is you can input your job, your profession, your areas of interest, what are the things that you value, et cetera, et cetera. And it will take that into account when it interacts with information for you. It will frame whatever it finds from the prism and the perspective of what you've told it you are about. Now, one of the secret rapid accelerations of the technology is, and nobody talks about this enough, but is its memory. If you remember when ChatGPT launched, it had very poor memory, right? You would have a conversation and a day later, well, we talked about this yesterday. Yeah, I have no clue about what we talked yesterday, right? Now you can have conversations with your LLM and it will remember the thread of the conversation for quite a long sustained period of time. You can refer to documents you've shared before. It will be able to relate to that, etc. So it's not very hard to imagine a near future where the memories start to become infinite, right? Where basically it just remembers everything always. When your AI agent is able to remember everything and remember every conversation you've had, every interaction that you've made, it will start to recognize the patterns. It will start to be able to create a psychographic of you in the background. And it will therefore be able to understand and put, pattern recognition behind what for you lovability means. Why would select a steak restaurant over a vegan restaurant, for example? Why you would choose a holiday in Tenerife over a holiday in Scandinavia? Just making simple examples, but it will start to see these patterns, right? This is, and especially when you accumulate that over time, the accuracy of this and of its ability to predict the types of decisions that you would probably make, this will make your AI butler and enable your AI butler to anticipate what lovability would mean to you. So when it goes out on after you've given it a prompt and you say, look, I need to find and book a holiday for coming summer, and I really don't know what to look for. And can you please come with some suggestions for me? Because I don't have time. I'm running late. I need to go to a meeting. Literally, it will be able to know that you are in a relationship and the preferences, and the dynamics at play that you need to take into account. It will know your previous kind of decisions and why and considerations you've made in the past, in order to do that. So it will be able to bring that in the context of its search. And then when it proposes things, it can literally say to you, and I have an example like this in the manifesto, but it can literally say to you, look, based on what I know about you, here is 3 options that all 3 fit what you would be looking for. But if I really know you well, I think you will favor this one.
Mm.
And this is where I think the technology will become, if it goes to that territory and if it further develops in that territory, it will become hyper powerful because it will enable brands to make their emotional layer parsable as well by the AI. And the AI can then say, well, your brand fits more with what my user is all about. And so I will favor your brand over another brand, even if your products are very similar. And this, in the end, has always been the art of branding, right? Because, if you take, to use the example of sports and running shoes, at the end of the day, it's a shoe, right? If it does the job, right? If it is a good brand, it will make shoes that do the job. So tick, the utilitarian aspect. So then what is left? Style, preference, a narrative around it, services around it, a, motivational layer. Yeah, something that you can see yourself with, right? It's style, it's many different things, design. And this is where I believe an AI can then pre-sort that for you, right? It can analyze you because it knows your taste, because it has seen the patterns, it has recognized the patterns over time. And in today, of course, we don't yet see this, right? And this is why, for a lot of us, it's hard to kind of see and predict this future. But at the end of the day, pattern recognition and the ability of the AI to recognize patterns longitudinally over a long period of time, I mean, it will know you better than you know yourself. And, this might sound science fiction, but the reason why, we're all stuck in our TikTok feeds, in a vortex of, I don't know, an hour scrolling and not being able to take our eyes off the screen is because of pattern recognition and because the AI knows exactly what to serve up next so that you stay glued on the screen. So the thing that we do not want the technology to do, right, is that we do not want the technology to use pattern recognition against us for commercial reasons, to serve us more ads, to, la, 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 la. That's what we don't want. But pattern recognition to actually be in service of us, that is very, very powerful. And so that to me is the lovability part is what we've always known and loved as brand and design and creative people, and vital for companies and brands to do right. And this is the part that we need to understand. How do we codify it in a way so that the AI agent is able to interpret that and then subsequently is able to render that in real time in the context of the user? But lovability doesn't stop there, because what I observe in agentic branding is that when the interface between technology and human, and thus intent and fulfillment, collapses and becomes instant and easy and on the spot, it creates a new open canvas. It creates a new canvas in the digital space to put in new experiences that at the moment we can't even yet imagine, right? Just as maybe I'm going to open a discovery thing. I'm going to say, hey, look, I'm in the mood for discovery right now. And what's going on, right? And that you get into a discovery experience, right? Where you discover all sorts of things. I don't know. I'm just kind of imagining, right? But we remove something meaningless, as I said. And I think there is an opportunity to therefore bring in new things that at the moment we just can't even conceptualize in many, many ways. The other thing that I believe it will do is it creates space for ultimately the authentic human experience. I mean, the rise of the creators, the podcasters, real people telling real stories, having in-depth conversations with each other, brands that cultivate communities, that bring together the tribes and really take active participation. all of the things that we already see today. I mean, it's not new. I only but think that this is just going to become even more important and something that is going to require even more time for brand and marketing teams to really focus on and to really build their relevance. So for me, the Legible-Lovable Law is saying, look, this is in the agentic branding, all the forces that we need to take into account. A disappearing interface, a very natural way for people to interact with the digital, which requires brand to be legible, verifiable, and trusted. And then ultimately, they need to understand how brands relate to what matters to their human. And because a lot of this friction is disappearing, because of that, new opportunities arise. Some of them will be digital, a discovery experience, for example, and some of them, a lot of them, will be actually through people and through really human and personal experiences.
And I think this is what I love is that I'm just imagining, let's say the ultimate scenario where because of experiences that I've had in real life or with real people or real ambassadors of a brand or something like this, that value maybe for me will be even more valuable than any top recommendation that is given to me. Imagine like the ultimate scenario where the AI says, here are 3 options. I recommend option 1, but me, because of the in real life experiences that I've had with option 3, a different brand than what the AI is recommending, I will ultimately choose option 3. And this is what I kind of love about the concept. And when you say lovability, I also think about, that other side. There is the lovability side of the actual codification, it's true. But there's also the lovability in and of itself based on the real human experiences that we're having. And for me, this is what really ticked when you described all this to me, is that we're sitting there kind of worrying about the human experience and the human role and things like this. And I always knew that that wasn't going to go away, but I said I didn't know how until you explained it like this. And so maybe this is just, I think, a good moment, because what I'm imagining now is that I think what people don't realize is that when they interact with an AI, also the questions that they pose are giving hints to the AI of who they are. They think that almost if I put it in a question format, I'm in a little bit of incognito mode. It's not true. So it's going to piece together, like you said, patterns and assumptions and stuff like this. And what it reminded me of was very much what we in marketing, let's say, were really excited about when lookalike audiences became a thing, where we were able to target people that are similar to these other people that we know already bought our brand. And that immediately obviously triggered for me the concept of performance marketing, which what happens to that? But not just that, but if the agents are controlling the discovery, the recommendation, the everything, what happens to all of the driving down the customer acquisition cost that we've been doing, all of the performance marketing, all of the things that we know, what happens there? I don't think we need to go too far, but just does that all kind of just go away, for lack of better words?
Well, there is for sure something going to compete with it, because one of the things that we can't fully anticipate right now is what's the comeback going to be and the answer going to be of the Googles of this world, of the OpenAIs of this world, on what they will propose to brands, right? I mean, there's many things in motions. They are coming with, proposals for brands. For example, inside ChatGPT, the ability to open apps, right? Which are branded apps, right? So there's a Spotify. If you say at Spotify, it will open up a Spotify space. So there will be new performance type things popping up within the AI, but we have accepted that when we are on social media platforms and we don't pay for them, that there will be ads served to us. We have accepted that when we go to Google and we do a search, that there will be sponsored ads everywhere. When we have an AI agent with whom we share our deepest conversations, who has our medical data, that makes purchase decisions for us, that is able to log in on our bank account, will we accept? And so this is where I have a question mark, and I don't know. I only can answer it for myself. And I can say that if my AI agent is biased and influenced in any way, I will not treat it seriously, and I will therefore not unlock everything for it, right? I will not go into the most private conversations with it, right? And so this is, I think, a little bit of a philosophical conversation as well on where this is going, where this will be governed, right? Will your AI butler in the future, will that indeed be a edge AI solution that is not in the cloud and not connected to, some ad serving system? And you have total sovereignty, right, over this AI and the data of you and about you, and security and privacy, all of that is gated for you and for your best interest? Or will it be, a free Google product that you install, on your device, right? That can also be. And there will be a big difference between those two scenarios. On the short term, this is not yet fully going to be a reality, right? In the next 2 years, this is not yet going to unfold in this way. This is really more the long-term direction, right?
I love how you say 2 years, and this is really the long term. I think the other realization that people need to have is that we're talking about completely different time frames. Again, like I was saying, kind of that forced evolution where we knew that the stuff that we were doing was just not in tune with the world. How many years has it been when we've been saying that it takes us too long to build campaigns, the cycles are too long, the decisions are made too slowly, all of these things. And in our industry, and that's why you see, I think, a lot of, I'm not going to go too far into this, but the holding companies and the networks and the things that are very bogged down, and they're kind of in a tight spot right now because they're forced to contend with the fact that they kind of ignored a lot of these issues that we knew were issues, right? And so I'm sitting there thinking that, okay, we don't have the answers to the performance marketing. It's true, and that's totally fine. But if you combine that with the fact of what we were talking about with pricing power, that you can't really play with the numbers as much as you. So from a brand survival, business survival in the agentic economy, we're getting to the point of we really have to rethink a little bit and probably play a lot on what we would maybe today consider organic growth in order to get the numbers that we want, especially if you also talk about valuation. How will investors choose where to put their money? Those are also people that are also having experiences, that also have emotions, that also, this is where kind of B2B, B2C, and all the spaces converge, is that we're all going to be having these experiences. This is not happening somewhere in isolation. So when it comes to business context that's what I was saying, customer acquisition costs and pricing power and valuation, all of this is going to be affected. This isn't this cute little thing is happening over here in the fluffy land that is branding.
And it was interesting when we were writing the manifesto, right? We were going on, sometimes we were talking about the audience, then we were talking about the customer, then a consumer, then
people.
It's a technology that every single person is going to use. And there was only but so much that we could cover in the manifesto. But think of your employee, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think of employee not just in the tools that it uses in the office, but your employee is a human being, and they will use AI with everything in their life. And so we're all getting this, between brackets, new behavior in the way that we relate and operate with technology. And so wherever you are, right, whether you're an investor, whether you're an employee, whether you're a creative, whether you're a consumer, whether you're like all of us in some shape or form, right, the way that we behave and we relate to technology is fundamentally being reshaped with the introduction of generative AI and AI solutions. You're absolutely right. And I think to come back to your opening question, about performance marketing, I think the best answer, at least for the short-term horizon, so the next 2 years, 3 years, is we need to very quickly realize that we are in a hybrid reality where the AI-mediated reality is no longer like a little signal. No, it's there. and it's there with big numbers, like 30%, 40% of traffic is, and it's rising really fast. And as you say, it's basically dependent on organic, right? It is on the evergreen content that you've got on your properties. It will be governed by consistency, clarity, parsability, traceability, and all of these things. It will be about influencing what you can and focusing on third-party information and data as well, right? I mean, whatever others are saying about you, look, you need to start listening. Because if you have a lot of media and a lot of users that are complaining about your customer care or are saying this, look, you need to start to close those gaps. And partially you can do it by publishing more about you and about your opinion, and you can try to influence media, and you can try to influence things, and you should. But at the same time is, look, the most important thing is if there is an actual gap between what you're saying and what your company is actually delivering, fix the gap. And that is this hybrid, I think, reality, because no performance marketing is going to beat your AI agent that does a double check for you. Because you might see an ad of a product somewhere in your Instagram feed or TikTok or wherever it is, and it just takes you one check with your LLM to say, hey, I saw this product, I made a screenshot, here, have a look, and then and say, yeah, well, I wouldn't buy it because it looks fake or whatever. Yeah.
And so this codification now that we need to do as brands, but this is drastically different than anything anybody's really currently doing with AI. No, I mean, everybody's talking to me about the things that I told you I don't really, I wasn't the biggest fan of, which was let's create more assets and let's, well, even from the writing perspective, like let's flood the internet with content, which ironically never worked before. I don't think it's going to work now, but they're constantly just talking about this, about content creation, about, you said it, geo and generative engine optimization and things like this. But this is drastically different. We're talking about codifying all that we are. So first of all, I'm going to ask you, what does that look like? What does that become? That's what you were proposing, no? When we were talking about, like, that's why you called the manifesto brand constitutions, because that's what this is. That's what we need in order to, let's say, play in this space, exist in this space, continue to exist in this space. What does that look like?
Yeah, so there's two sides to this, and I'll start with why I started to call this brand constitutions. So let me start with the word constitution. Constitution kind of means and implies a foundational law. And so something that needs to be true and govern the rights and wrongs and the guardrails for everything that the brand can possibly do. What I like about constitution versus guideline is that a guideline is kind of saying, go approximately over there, right? That it's a guideline, right? And a constitution is actually saying, well, this is the foundational way of behaving. And these would be the guardrails. These are the no-go zones. And whatever we do, it must comply to this constitution. And the reason why, I felt that this is the way to conceptualize it and to think about it is because if we get in a situation in the near future where the majority of digital brand expressions that are proliferating over the World Wide Web are no longer created by an individual or an agency, and therefore had the careful nuanced interpretation of a guideline and was checked, double checked, triple checked by a team. Instead, we're moving in a place where it is real-time generated and outputted into a AI LLM chat interface, which is kind of what is happening today already. And therefore, there is an infinite amount of manifestations of your brand, uncontrollable what each of these manifestations could be, because it highly depends on the prompt, right? I mean, what is the person asking? It means that you need to codify your brand behavior, your brand identity, your brand experience in such a way that when the AI is triggered to think or to reach out to your brand, it can very quickly interpret it. It can very quickly understand it. And it can very accurately then represent it for you when it has figured out that your brand is actually the right suggestion for its user. If you make it impossible for this agent to possibly make it anywhere consistent with what you want your brand experience to be, your agent will try its best, but chances are it will not create a consistent experience with who you want to be as a brand. And I can make that very concrete, right? Having governed, brand across big organizations, consistency, I've always said, is consistency is our biggest enemy, right? Or inconsistency is our biggest enemy. Because, any asset that you made 6 months ago is still going to be online today, and it's probably going to still be online tomorrow. And so I might have created a new campaign that looks slightly different and smells slightly different, but now all of this stuff over a long period of time coexists at the same time in the virtual space. Now, that might work for human consumption in targeted media advertising, but in an organic Gen AI situation that parses the internet and just stumbles on what it can find, and look, here it's green, there it's blue, here you say this, there you say this other thing, here you're contradicting yourself, here the logo appears over here, now the logo appears this. Your color palette all over the place. Oh, you've used different fonts in this campaign, and in this campaign is what is the AI supposed to get from that? And this is where I thought, okay, because this is how AI works today. And I encourage any listener to try this out for themselves because it's very easy to make. But this is literally what AI does today. And we therefore need to think about codifying the brand, which we've talked about before. But we need to make this accessible and let's say almost like a fast track for the AI when it reaches your domain. When it hits your corporate website or your brand website, instead of browsing and crawling through your entire website and pages, etc., to just make sense of what your brand is and what your logo is and what your color palette is, it needs to have a separate entrance that says, here's the brand DNA, boom. And then in a very simple, accessible format, it has everything it needs to be able to render the brand in an accurate sense. This doesn't exist, right? So I am conceptualizing something which I call a brand API driven by a brand constitution, and it operates an API, meaning that there is a direct connection, right, between the agent and this brand constitution. But this doesn't exist today. So it's not, just that X thing, because it just doesn't exist. But it's something that I've conceptualized as I think this will need to be the solution, because it will need to coexist for now with still a human created web experience and websites, etc., for the next couple of years. I mean, it's not that websites are going to disappear tomorrow. It's going to take a while. But in this hybrid reality, we need to start to think about, okay, how do we make things already work and prepare ourselves for the now, for these generated experiences that are happening as we speak? For example, the OpenAI ChatGPT shopping experience that we have now, and what is coming in a couple of years. So the earlier we start to build this, the more we are already getting prepared for what is going to come when those agent mediated experiences are only going to grow and become better and more high fidelity. So so that is indeed, let's say, my thinking around the brand constitution. Now, what is important here is that there is another observation, and that is that when looking at the current asset creation process, right, the one that we've known for the last 30 odd years, where we've been creating assets using CAD and using digital products, etc., there is, in the hybrid, there will still be a role for this kind of work, which will be accelerated dramatically by Gen AI solutions. And we see a lot of these solutions at the moment, right? Gaining speed and gaining traction. And I'm not going to name too many names, but, big brands that are building, tools and the applications that we've been using for years, are moving in, integrating Gen AI solutions into these platforms and in all of this. There is agencies that are turning their agency model into a SaaS model, right? Where they have an end-to-end flow solution that generates assets and produces campaigns, et cetera. And they are able to basically sell this service, right, to big brands and companies. And
Ironically, even Google went into that space, no? Because you can now build your brand and assets through that as well.
correct. Like Google has a product out there, indeed, where you can just type in your URL and it very quickly understands your brand and it is then able to help you build assets. But there's two components here. So one is that, yes, in the hybrid reality, this is still something that needs to exist because we still need to make assets. And, also for offline matters, we will always need to make assets. I mean, it's not that asset creation is going to disappear. I mean, there's still a real world out there. We still need to make products. We still need to make packagings. We still need to make, right? I mean, the real world is, as we said, maybe even more important than ever. So there will be a lot of asset creation in this space, which will be powered and enabled by Gen AI. And we need to start to think about, okay, well, what does this mean? How do we work with Gen AI, et cetera? But what is critical is what all of these, so whether it is the software that we currently use for creating assets, or whether it is, new Gen AI workflows that generate assets for you with generative pipelines, they all need the same thing at the front end. And in the past, I would have given them my brand guidelines. Here is my brand portal. I've got everything there. You can download all the PDFs. There's all the fonts that you can download, because they need to train the Gen AI models to interpret the brand in the right way. So what you see happening is that a lot of these vendors, they are coming with, hey, we can ingest your brand, right? And we can train the model on your brand so that we can then produce assets that will be reflective of your brand. And this is where, as a brand leader, I thought to myself, but hold on, do I even want this? I don't want my brand DNA to be living in a system which is not mine and not governed by my organization and my team, and create some lock-in scenario with one vendor. That's not what I think is what we need here. What we need here is we need a system which is independent, governed by us as a company and as a brand, that has also an API connection to vendor solutions, so that I can go to any vendor and say, hey, here, plug into my brand constitution, and they just get everything they need from the brand. And that to me makes a lot of sense, because then it's something that we can actually, actively govern and curate as a brand. And the larger your team is, the more creative you can actually employ to curate this brand constitution and all of its intricacies, behaviors and signatures and what have you, whilst giving it access, empowering two things at the same time. It can power your asset creation processes and vendors with your internal teams and with agencies and with Gen AI magical solutions that are out there. And then on the other side, it can be a directly accessible API in the hybrid reality, where there is just agents going real time to this brand API and are going to be rendering our brand for us in real time within LLMs. Because then you're serving two things at the same time. It's serving the hybrid reality at the same time. Hence the idea of brand constitutions. But brand guidelines has traditionally been always something governed by a brand team, either within communications or under the CMO, right? Or a brand function on its own, if it's really like a brand-led organization. But now it starts to become a shared operation, right, between a CIO and a CMO, because this API will need to be
Legible and lovable.
legible and lovable. And from the legibility side, it means very much the codification, the securing of the information, the provenance certifications and the checking. So there's a lot of stuff that, the creative teams, are not accustomed to doing, and really are, let's say, a CIO's remit to really wrap their minds around and also put into place and also govern and make sure that this runs according to all standards and protocols required.
So it very much puts brand at the epicenter, as we always said. But what I kind of, again, love about it, and I will bring this back over and over again, is that all of a sudden you start to see where the professionals and the experts that we were so worried about still play a role. Because the metaphor that I always loved that you gave about, let's say, this whole rendering of the experiences is very much like a gaming engine. And I always found that fascinating. So when you kind of explained to me this, what you call the, let's say, experience engine being very similar to the gaming engine. So we're talking about a brand constitution that has a multitude of layers, right? Many nuances. You have to think about the various target audiences and their possible, not just like preferences, but also their goals, their journeys, their ambitions, and what they're, and I'm going to use the word that I always love that you use, which is like, what are they on the journey for, on the quest for in life? And to bring all of that into this constitution. And for that, we're talking about exactly the, I would say, the training that many of us in this industry have, whether it's visual, verbal, behavioral, psychological, a lot of these things need to be brought in order to put this constitution together, right? And so we're talking about a lot of manpower at the end of the day, and a lot of human driven understanding of people, but also human driven generation of things at the end of the day, in a way that, for example, me, I was never really able to see until we had the discussion.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. And this is where, maybe in the short term, phase one, a brand constitution is predominantly, let's say, serving up, visual, verbal assets, right? Once the technologies further evolve, so the capabilities of the edge computing and the edge AI, the current vibe coding that we're seeing, where, with just one prompt, an entire interface is just built in real time in front of you for exactly what you want. The real world models that are now really accelerating both on the Google side, but also, new startups in that domain really accelerating. Those are world models, meaning they are able to render real world environments that you can literally just walk through, right? With either a prompt or an image, right? You send them an image and it creates an entire world around you. So indeed, I the parallel, and that's why I used it of the gaming engine, because if we take a very simple game like Minecraft that I think most of us probably know and can visually sort of call up, Minecraft is one of these games that, has a very, very unique look and feel. I mean, once you've seen Minecraft, you will see when it is Minecraft, right? Very clearly that brand. But there is no one Minecraft the same as one other Minecraft, because the creativity and the agency of the player is so determining how this Minecraft experience plays out. Infinite gameplay, infinite creativity, infinite fun, multiplayer. And this is what I conceptualize, right? Minecraft is Minecraft. You will see the brand. I mean, there's no escape. You will understand this is the brand. Yet, the way that this brand manifests in a personal, relatable, meaningful way to the player in that moment is infinite, with infinite possibilities. And therefore, I believe there is an opportunity for brands in that not too distant future, for sure not tomorrow. So it's definitely phase 2, phase 3. But 3, 4, 5 years down the line, we will get there. And we will get into a place where we need to conceptualize our brands not as static. Our guidelines shouldn't be guiding how an out-of-home poster should be designed. Our brand guidelines need to describe our brand world. How does our brand behave? How does it feel when you are in a bad mood? How does it feel when you're in a good mood? How does it feel when you've achieved an important milestone on the road towards your quest? How does it feel when you actually achieve your quest? And this is where there is an incredible opportunity for brands. And subsequently, to the point that you made about the talent, right? There is an incredible opportunity. If you think about, what designers do, what strategists do, what UX designers do, the work that we do to create, the work that we do to understand people and to understand people in their lives, to understand how do we create a message, a story, an experience that is really going to touch their soul and is really going to move them and create a shared experience within this tribe that you're trying to reach, the people that have shared beliefs, right? Because ultimately that is what it comes down to. We will need those capabilities to help us not only build these constitutions, but I keep using the word curate these constitutions, because this is not going to be a build and forget kind of thing. It's not, oh yeah, let's build the guidelines and put them in a drawer and then we'll revise them in 3 years' time. No, it's going to be, we build it and we need to curate it and govern it day in, day out. It's a living thing. So I really see this evolution for our craft in this domain. And having said that, I also still believe that, making assets and things in the real world will still take up a lot of our attention and a lot of our craft. So that will still be there. But governed by something very intelligent and governed by something that requires a lot of craft and a lot of human intent. Because I think what I discovered and what is still very much the debate, right, among creatives and among a lot of people is an AI is not able and not yet able to have and understand human emotion in the way that we experience and understand it. What AI can do is AI can see patterns. And because it sees the patterns and it understands the patterns, it will be able to achieve a level of creativity and a level of emotive inventiveness, etc. Not today, but at some point it will start to get close. And as such, I believe that it is going to be imperative for that brand constitution to always be crafted with human created content, because it's that human created content aided by AI. I don't see any problem with creation which is helped by AI. I mean, I do it myself all the time, right? I have an idea and I'm okay, throw it with AI. It will kind of provoke me back with some counterpoints or counter ideas that then spark some new thinking within me again. So there's this kind of creative process sparring that can happen. But I would never just autonomously say, okay, go make something and I just publish it, that as a fresh idea. So I would still want the human curation, the human ingenuity kind of there to really craft and create and curate this brand constitution. However, once that is done, I need to be able to get to a place where I can blindly trust that thing to create infinite amount of assets that are going to be representative of my brand. Also from a brand safety point of view, right? We will need to be able to trust it. So we will need to put in a lot of checkpoints, a lot of guardrails. We will need to have ways to understand, what kind of experiences it's creating, et cetera, et cetera. So there's many new things that we will need to think about in the brand management and brand governance space. But the point that I am really adamant about is that it's the human creativity that creates and curates the brand constitution. And I don't see this in the next 10 years being any different, right? I also think that at some point AI will become so powerful potentially that question mark, because nobody knows what will happen at that point, but that's not as close. I mean, that's going to be further out in the future.
This is what, again, I think is kind of fascinating. And I'm not surprised because, like I said, from a philosophical perspective, you kind of know that it's going to go, that things are ultimately going to drive towards, let's say, a more quality driven human, like a parallel experience to the human one. So this concept of the business being able to like visibly evolve through that curation on an ongoing basis, that it's not static, that it's not, all of these things are reminiscent or similar to how we experience things as well. And so that's what branding, I think, has always been about, from not like a logo design perspective, but from a, emotion, meaning, evolution, humanity perspective. And what we were always trying to, let's say, tell business leaders is this is essential. This is the core of it all, and I feel like now with the brand constitution, you're starting to see that actually come into like palpable fruition for these leaders, that maybe because of like the intangibility of it or the lack of metrics or the something like this, they had difficulty giving brand or branding in general as a whole, the attention that it deserved, the support that it deserved, the resources that it deserved. And now you're starting to see how, ironically, the technology that everybody thought would kind of go against this is actually bringing the fundamentals and the branding that we all believed in to the center, to the forefront, in a way that is undeniably there. Even the safety that you were mentioning, that's all brand reputation. That's exactly, one of the elements in and of itself. So for me, this is great. I mean, brilliant. It's definitely, I feel the shock and the hesitation of everybody. I'm not immune to it because, we're all kind of, like you said, figuring it out. Obviously, in your case, more ahead than others. But my question that I think everybody will be asking is, and I guess there's two sides to it. There's like the established brand side and the less established brand side. Because even if there's, I don't want to say there's time, because there is not really time, because this will take time. So it's almost like you have to start now, or the earlier, the age old truth of the earlier you start, the easier it is, because you can start to kind of piece the things together. But I guess on the established brand side, if I'm a chief marketing officer, a chief digital officer, a chief growth officer, for example, what do I do first? And then after that, I will also ask you for, let's say, the less established brands that are probably looking at this in a very different way. But if I'm in an established brand, what do you recommend? Is it like some kind of auditing process? Is it, how can I, let's say, assess the state that I'm in and figure out what the next steps forward are?
Yeah, I mean, without going into too much of the moat, let's say, behind this, but yes, it comes down to, auditing, and what we're calling GEO or AEO is, is something that is absolute must, and we need to move very quickly in fixing the basics, right? I mean, you need to be legible, and you need to be able to be parsed, and you need to be able to show up. But then secondly is I would really move into really auditing and understanding how your brand is fully interpreted on a lot of the queries and the prompts that your key users are asking about your brand, or the quests that surround your brand and your brand might be relevant within. I would really put a lot of attention to that and starting to understand, well, first of all, how does our brand show up? Does it show up? What are the issues? What are the gaps between what we say and what we do? What are the inconsistencies? All stuff that we can audit, right? I mean, we can audit the inconsistencies even within your premises, and we can audit these between what you're saying and what others are saying. This needs to be priority number one, so that you have a good picture of what is the status quo. And then based on that, you can then start to chart out steps to start to mitigate some of the issues. Of course, there is also the analysis of your current processes, right? I think this is an important step to take because before we can go into, any Gen AI solution or anything is, we need to analyze and understand the end-to-end sort of process of how you actually now, like, how does the content on your website show up today? Like, who are the people involved making the content, producing the content, governing the content, all of this kind of stuff. Who is producing?
And this is also partners, tech, et cetera, platforms, all of this.
Yeah, because you cannot solve something just on the front end, right? You need to go to your process in order for it to start to flow in a right way. And then we need to design a process which is, let's say, native with an agentic process in mind, right? Where we immediately go and design the process in such a way where we understand where AI and agents are going to be doing some of the steps or parts of the steps in the process.
But it is
Yeah.
an overarching thing. Like I guess that's what I'm trying to get at, is to go back to the concept of brand. And what we always knew about brand is that this is a fully fledged governance question. And it will help to, let's say, gather the alignment that I think a lot of us always wanted, even the singular gaps that everybody likes to kind of complain about in their own silos, sales and marketing, brand and business. We can name so many of them. But at the end of the day, like I said, this is a huge opportunity to say, okay, there is a clear need, there is a clear future. We don't know the details, but what we know is that we can either go against the flow, or we can take it as an opportunity to assess, like you said, rethink, and really say, okay, I'm tired of kind of hitting the same repetitive wall over and over again in different forms. I'm going to take responsibility for the fact that if I want to survive, because I'm understanding from you that this is a survival question. This is like, you don't think about this. You will not be surfaced, you will not be rendered, you will not be loved, you will not be. So at the end of the day, it's kind of the moment, I would say, to stop dabbling in small changes and really sit there and think, how can I take this as an opportunity to do things? I don't want to say the right way.
Yeah, and I think what it comes down to is again, people, processes, tools, right? I mean, this is what we're talking about. And when you talk governance, is we need to recognize that we need to bring together the right coalition, right? So, the way that I see it
Mhm.
is between a CMO and a CIO, right? They are sort of the chiefs that are governing and should be bringing together this new cross-functional team, brand operational team, where we will have, both the technology experts on one side and the brand marketing experts and communication experts on the other side. An end-to-end new process needs to be designed and framed for this constant and ongoing curation and the build of this brand constitution. And then, what then needs to be architected is the short-term, immediate, let's say, technology that needs to be put in place or needs to be done, and the creative work that needs to be done, in order to make that fly, which is going to be a minimal effort in the first place. It's going to be your visual language, your verbal guidelines, etc. It will be kind of like what you know now in your brand guidelines, but then made and codified at an ontological precision level so that a machine can interpret that with a lot of accuracy. And I think that would be phase one and step one. But then from there, we need to start to evolve it, right? So it needs to be something that will evolve and become more complex, like a more gaming engine with much more intricacies once the technology also starts to mature. So
Mm.
some are tackle the geo and the agent engine optimization, right? Go in, tackle it. On the other side, start to build, your brand guidelines in a way that it is encoded and machine readable, so that both your agencies can connect to it directly, and all of the tooling that designers and specialists are using are connecting to this thing directly. And secondly, to offer it as an API to the LLMs, so that when they parse your website, they get pointed to this thing so that they can interpret your brand as of tomorrow in the most accurate possible way. I mean, that is what I would do for the first, in the first 100 days, and try to get this up and running.
And now, last question for now, because I think we're going to have more of these conversations, especially as we go into, how do the different roles function, and also just kind of keeping, I don't want to say tabs, but keeping the conversation going on what's developing and how the horizons are and the timescapes are kind of shifting. Because even while we were doing this manifesto, there were things that you thought would be 5 years in the future. It became 3 or 2, or while we were working on it. So I think it's just, that's what I'm saying, is that the time really is now. But I just want to ask for the people that, might be watching this and might be thinking, okay, but I'm not a mega established brand, or even if I have a category or a sub brand or a product, even probably the concepts are parallel, that I'm launching anew, you know, if agents are the ones kind of like recalling our choices and doubling down on the memory and rendering the experiences, then how can new things enter and compete in this world? Do you have any, let's say, advice or
Well,
thoughts on that?
yeah, I mean, and there's a scale between size, right? I mean, are we talking like really small business, one person or a 5-person organization that is using a Shopify, or is it a medium-sized business? So let me say this. I think the larger your organization, the more complex your task will be, right? So the complexity of this significantly reduces the smaller you are,
Hmm.
right? The complexity of big brands is that a lot of the brand experience and the brand creation is distributed, right? It's distributed across business units, across regions. There's a lot of complexity there, which is what brands are going to be facing, when they are transitioning to a brand constitution and a way of operationalizing it is. For a smaller company, maybe just a single product company or a single value proposition company or a single market brand, right? I mean, there, the challenges, they become significantly smaller in complexity to resolve. In terms of what it is they need to do, yeah, it comes down to the same, because it's not that an LLM will treat you differently because you're small, right? It will treat you in the exact same way as whether
We
you're
can
big.
classify that as another benefit, maybe.
Yeah.
Another
It,
unexpected, let's say, benefit. The
yeah.
democratization of the space.
Exactly. And I think the only real difference is quantity of assets that might be out there today and the quantity of citations that might be out there today, right? And those would be things, that already were a reality in an SEO world. So I don't think a lot is changing. You need to get out
Mhm.
there. Brand, you need to get out there, you need to get in the media, you need to get on podcasts. Your brand needs to be cited and needs to be present. But once those basics, let's say, are in place in terms for you to operationalize your brand experience, yeah, I mean, the solution is going to be the same. And I would think that the smaller you are, the more democratized this actually becomes, because I believe, products like a Shopify will integrate this like a brand constitution kind of thinking. They will integrate this straight into Shopify. The Google solution that we discussed just earlier, the Pomeli, you type in your URL and it kind of, proposes, campaigns for you for an asset creation. So I think for smaller brands, this will be very easy tools for founders and for little company owners, to be able to kind of deal with this. The complication is more with the legacy brands and the legacy teams to make this pivot. Yeah.
I have to admit, I like that. Let's say the smaller brands also have a good chance of making a dent. I think that's always nice. But I must thank you for the conversation. Really, again, every time we speak, and we've probably spoken hundreds of times now, but every time we speak, and like I said, there will probably be more of this done, I think,
Yeah.
publicly, so that others can also, let's say, delve a little bit into the conversations that we have, because they really are fascinating. And I do want to give more and more people access to you and to, yeah, the discussions that we're having and the discussions that I'm sure we will be having moving forward with others that kind of join into this conversation now that we've published the manifesto and it's getting, let's say, the feedback and the attention that it is. So for anyone listening that wants to download Thomas's manifesto called Brand Constitutions, as I said, it's available at brandingmag.com/library. So you can easily find it, brandingmag.com/library. And should you wish to speak with Thomas, you can either connect with him on LinkedIn. He will always reply, I'm sure, or you can write to our team if you want, info@brandingmag.com, really easily, and we can put you in touch. And just share your thoughts with us, either through email or on social. We'd love to hear your feedback. We'd love to keep the conversation going. As Thomas so humbly says, and as you can see, he's brilliant, but it is the beginning of something immense. So I think we are all very aware that yes, some of us might be ahead in the thinking and we might be able to kind of help guide others. It's true. And we're doing our best, I think, collaboratively to figure out what that looks like and how we can make, I guess, the best impact while still, which is the part that I love, kind of fighting for the human side of everything. So I really thank you, Thomas. I think even our relationship is an emblem of the balance that this future holds. So for that, I am, yeah, incredibly grateful. So thanks again.
Thank you, Flavia.